All right, so let's say we're trying to add functionality to allow attaching notes to emails. So we have like this view menu item. This is just view, it doesn't really matter. We say like sticky note, add note item, and that this component corresponds to this drop down here. So we have a little add note thing. We need to implement add note. And to start off, if you look at some of these other very basic actions here, and Copilot trying to generate all of this for me, you can call like dot update, and we'll say note. This is a test note. So the first thing to call out is this fails TypeScript. It says object literal can only specify known properties, which include the primary key, tags, attachments, a bunch of other things. It's not part of the update email spec. And where all of that comes from, there's a couple layers of indirection here that I'll walk through. So first we have this update call that is basically all just a wrapper around an API call to /emails/pk on patch. What this API object is, and everything from here on out has nothing to do with Vue, it's just pure TypeScript. If we look at where API is defined, this is coming from OpenAPI TypeScript fetch. This is sort of the secret sauce, and like this is not something I built. This is an open source package. If we go over here, you can see basically what this does is you pass in a OpenAPI spec, and you configure a fetch command with that, and then everything that you pass into that fetch command is type checked against the OpenAPI spec, which is really, really nice. To give you an example, so we're passing in this paths object that button down autogens, and if you look over here, you can basically see it is the entire external facing API. So in our case, we were trying to patch an email. So you can see /emails/pk. You have all the parameters that are passed in. This is the query level parameters. And then if you scroll all the way down, that refs out to an email update input. And if we search for this, you can see all of the various properties, included tags, excluded tags, attachments, publish date, subject, etc. So how does this get generated? If we jump from the front end all the way over to the back end, you can see we have a class email update input. And so this is being defined in Django Ninja, which is sort of a successor to Django REST framework, and is built on top of Pydantic. So you basically specify something that looks like a data class with all of the various inputs. And as soon as you do that, like you then also have to generate a route. And that route is just like a dumb view. If you sort of look through this, you have sort of a high-level path, you define all of the responses, and so on and so forth, and run all of your validations yourself. But the one thing that Django Ninja does that is much better than DRF, if you're familiar with DRF, is like the OpenAPI spec that it generates is really, really good because you have to be so explicit with all of the schema types as opposed to like the serializer-based approach, which is like not great. So all we would really have to do here is say notes. The reason everything is specified as like or none. There's probably like a more clever way to do this, but it's just it's an update method. So all of the things that you're passing in are technically optional. So if we pass this in, and then the endpoint is now updated, so we can run a quick command to basically regenerate the file. And for this, I use a just file, which is sort of like a nice way to group commands. The specific one, if I can find it here, is So first we call generate files. This is sort of like an internal thing that I have. We look at the git diff, or I guess I should stash this real quick and then reapply that. So right now, the git diff is just the change to notes. But then if I go into the just file and I run, I'm skipping some of these steps because in this just file, there's a bunch of like validations and tests that it runs. But the core thing here to regenerate that open API schema is this command generate files. And what this does, as you can see from the output, is I have a couple things that are basically here, generate this TypeScript blob or give me something from the backend so I can sync it to the front end. And if we call git diff now, you can see that in line 5324 of assets autogen open API.json, we now have that notes blob. So that's half of it. That gives us the JSON, but it doesn't convert it to the TypeScript, which is what OpenAPI TypeScript fetch needs. For that, we use this package. I think it's literally just called OpenAPI TypeScript, which has some weird edge cases and eccentricities, but has been really, really useful thus far. And so if we were to call this, need to do that from root. So we ran that. And if you see now in the OpenAPI TypeScript spec, we have an optional field for next, which means if we go back to the email row actions and we try making that change again, this now passes TypeScript validation. There's not actually a lot of secret sauce that I built here. It's mostly cobbling together Django Ninja plus my OpenAPI generator, which I'll go through in a second, and then OpenAPI TypeScript, and then OpenAPI TypeScript fetch. So there's not a lot to like open source or pull out, but like the combination of those things is really, really great. And the sort of coda to all of this, just going back to this view file, this is the actual external facing API for button down. Like 95% of all of the backend interactions that button down does on its actual app front end proxies through the external facing API. This is a thing I learned from Stripe. There's a lot of pain points associated with it in terms of it's harder to iterate quickly on an external facing API, where as soon as something's live and people are using it outside of your app, you have a contract that you need to enforce. But it's great dogfooding because it makes you really, really care about the performance of the external facing API. And you get all of this stuff for free of like, you're forced to kind of think about a really well-shaped, well-typed ergonomic API. The only real massaging I do to the Open API spec is, and I have it somewhere here, schema generator. There's some, where is it? That's not the one I'm looking for. Schema. Maybe it is. Yeah, I guess this is. Oh, it's because I abstracted some of the stuff out. Now I guess all of this is completely fine. Base schema. Here we go. Sorry about that. There's just some weird edge cases in Django Ninja. It's like kind of a immature framework, and what it tries to do with Pydantic in terms of generating the schema is not perfect in a lot of ways. So I have some like logic here just around, here's an example. Emails have a status enum that's like, it's sent, it's in flight, blah, 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 blah. Subscribers have a status enum that's like unsubscribed, premium, blah, 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 blah. Django Ninja doesn't have a easy way of resolving the fact that they're both called status, like they're both a class of status. And so I had to implement some logic here around that. There are things of that nature. But like this is very duct tapey, monkey patchy code that is probably better destined to be upstreamed into Django Ninja as opposed to open source. That was pretty rambly. Hopefully that was interesting and answered some questions. DM me if you have any other questions.